We're back, and the next item on the agenda is a presentation by CNSC staff on CNSC's early role in an initiative for a deep geological repository for the long-term management of Canada's used nuclear fuel as outlined in CMD 15-M4. And Dr. Newland, I think you still have the floor.
I do indeed. Thank you. So, good afternoon, Mr. President, members of the Commission. My name is Dr. David Newland, and I am the Acting Director General of the Directorate for Nuclear Cycle and Facilities Regulation. With me today are Ms. Karine Glenn, Director, Waste and Decommissioning Division, Ms. Julie Meckie, Senior Project Officer in the Waste and Decommissioning Division, and Dr. Julie Brown, Geoscientist Specialist in the Environmental Risk Assessment Division, as well as other support staff. CNSC staff are here today to provide information to Commission members on the CNSC's early role in an initiative for a deep geological repository for used nuclear fuel, specifically focusing on how we are explaining our regulatory role to communities who are in the Learn More process, and on how CNSC staff collaborate internationally. I will now turn the presentation over to Ms. Meckie, who will deliver the first part of the presentation, and then Dr. Brown will deliver the second part, and then we'll wrap up for questions. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Julie Meckie. I'm a Senior Project Officer in the Waste and Decommissioning Division. CNSC staff presentation will cover the following. First, I'll provide some background information on the Nuclear Waste Management Organization, or NWMO. Second, I'll provide some information on the status of NWMO's initiative for a deep geological repository, or DGR, for Canada's used fuel, which the NWMO has called the Adaptive Phase Management Approach, or APM. Next, I'll explain CNSC staff's early involvement in the NWMO's APM initiative, and I'll focus on our pre-licensing activities, specifically CNSC outreach activities with communities. I'll talk about the CNSC NWMO service agreement and CNSC's independent advisory group. Then I'll provide examples of CNSC's open houses that we have conducted when requested by communities. And finally, Dr. Brown will talk about how we collaborate internationally on DGRs. And then I'll finish explaining the next steps. So the NWMO is a non-for-profit corporation established under the Nuclear Fuel Waste Act by Canada's current nuclear energy corporations, the three nuclear power reactor corporations, who are Ontario Power Generation, Hydro-Quebec, and New Brunswick Power Corporation, and the Canadian Nuclear Laboratories, which was formerly AECL. The NWMO is not a federal agency or Crown corporation. The NWMO is responsible for implementing the Adaptive Phase Management Approach accepted by the Government of Canada for the long-term management of Canada's used fuel. It is responsible for all used fuel in Canada. To be clear, if an application were submitted to the CNSC in the future, the NWMO would be the licensed applicant. So to be clear, at this time, no site has been chosen. However, this slide shows NWMO's conceptual, not final, design for a deep geological repository for used nuclear fuel. NWMO's most recent concept is that a DGR would be located at a depth of approximately 500 meters within bedrock. The host rock type has not yet been decided, but will be located in either crystalline or sedimentary rock. On the right-hand side, the conceptual illustration shows the surface facilities as number 1, the shafts as number 2, and the layout of the galleries underground, which is number 3. The center illustration shows the potential orientations of the waste containers in a hypothetical repository. So either vertically, horizontally, or surrounded by bentonite clay as a sealing material. And finally, the left-hand side shows the possible design for the used nuclear fuel canister, where the fuel bundles are encased in a copper canister with a seal liner. Next, I'll provide an update on the NWMO's APM initiative. So the NWMO states that the APM specifies that used nuclear fuel will be placed in a centralized repository underground in a rock formation that provides the required containment and isolation. Public engagement will occur at all stages, and the host community for the repository would be an informed and willing one. Furthermore, the NWMO has stated that this is a $16 to $24 billion national infrastructure project. While the NWMO has not established a fixed timetable for implementing the APM, the funding formula for contributions has been developed, and that assumes a geological repository would be in operation by 2035. In May 2010, the NWMO launched its 9-step site selection process to look for volunteer communities to host a repository. The appendix of this presentation includes details on the NWMO's 9 steps. In September 2012, the NWMO indicated that no more communities will be accepted into their Learn More process. The NWMO started with 22 communities. Currently, as of January 22nd, 2015, 11 communities remain in the process. This is NWMO's map showing the location of the communities involved in the process. There were initially 22 communities, and as of January 22nd, 2015, there are now 11 communities, 1 in Saskatchewan and 10 in Ontario. The blue circles are communities that are still in the NWMO's Learn More process, and the light gray circles are communities that were originally in the NWMO's Learn More process, but have not been identified for further study by the NWMO. As mentioned, there are 9 steps in the NWMO site selection process. This slide will focus on steps 2, 3, and 4. The first box is step 2, which is an initial screening. At this stage, the NWMO carries out a high-level screening with existing information. The second box is step 2, which is a preliminary assessment. And currently, all 11 communities are in step 3 of the process. Step 3 has 2 sub-steps, and I've called them phase 1 and phase 2. In phase 1, desktop feasibility studies are conducted and engagement activities are conducted by the NWMO. At this stage, community liaison committees, or CLCs, are formed, and I'll explain more about CNSC's outreach activities to the CLCs in this presentation. In phase 2, this is where initial field work and broadened community engagement activities are carried out by the NWMO. Field work may consist of aerial geophysical surveys and geological mapping. Depending on these results, deep boreholes may be drilled at selected sites. And currently, no boreholes have been drilled at any sites. They are still at the initial phases of step 3, phase 2. So step 3 activities are designed to assess the potential suitability of communities to host a DGR for used nuclear fuel, and possibly at the end, identify 1 or 2 preferred sites for which would move on to step 4, which is the detailed site characterization. And to be clear, no site has been identified to proceed to step 4. Now I will discuss the role of the CNSC. While no CNSC license is being sought by the NWMO at this time, the early involvement of the CNSC in the NWMO's APM activities is important because it helps to ensure that there's no misunderstanding of the NWMO's plans by the regulator and vice versa. It also allows CNSC to engage early on with the public on our regulatory process and our regulatory role. In addition, international best practice supports the involvement of the regulator early in the process of siting a deep geological repository. Therefore, CNSC staff's objectives for this period are to, first, build our own independent knowledge, start a dialogue with the future applicant, communicate the CNSC's roles and responsibilities, and I'll explain how we are doing this with communities, specifically CLCs, provide clear regulatory expectations, especially on key safety aspects, maximize national and international collaboration, and my colleague, Dr. Brown, will discuss this further, and review key research publications from proponent. The CNSC's early involvement with the NWMO is formalized in a service agreement. The service agreement between the CNSC and NWMO is good until the end of March 2019 or until a license application has been submitted, if one is. It identifies areas of CNSC possible involvement in the pre-licensing period prior to the submission of a license application. The service agreement is posted on CNSC's website. The areas of CNSC's involvement include participating at public meetings to explain our regulatory role, reviewing NWMO's materials with respect to CNSC's regulatory role, and conduct pre-licensing reviews of conceptual design and post-closure safety assessments for 2 hypothetical cases. One case is in a crystalline rock formation, and the other case is in a sedimentary rock formation. Since no site has been selected, the review will be conducted at a fairly high level. The CNSC recently signed a contribution agreement with Carleton University to fund an independent advisor group, or an IAG. The IAG will provide independent geoscientific advice to CNSC staff as we prepare for the possible future license application from the NWMO. The IAG will do this by reviewing key NWMO technical documents as well as CNSC's own internal research program. This approach is similar to that of the Finnish regulator STUK and the Swedish regulator SSM. And Dr. Brown will discuss CNSC's meetings and visits with the other regulators later in the presentation. The CNSC's independent advisory group is comprised of Canadian experts in the geosciences who are independent from the NWMO. Members are geoscientists from Carleton University, Queen's University, McMaster University, the University of Manitoba, and the Geological Survey of Canada. Current membership is for a 3-year period and may be renewed. In the future, the IAG may be requested to focus on one or more specific topics or to evaluate areas of investigation that may be included in an actual safety case and or supporting safety assessment. CNSC staff expects the group to continue until a license application is submitted if the NWMO submits one in the future. Next, I'll focus on CNSC pre-licensing outreach activities. At this early stage, before a license application has been submitted, the CNSC staff outreach activities serve to simply explain our regulatory role as the independent watchdog. We also try to start to build our own relationships with communities. CNSC is currently conducting outreach activities at the request of communities, or CLCs, in the NWMO's Learn More process, and we've also recently been expanding to Aboriginal groups. CNSC meets with communities, or CLCs, who have expressed interest in learning more about CNSC's regulatory role. The format and sequence can be as followed. So first, typically, is a day-long meeting in Ottawa with representatives from the community. Typically, this includes the mayor and council members. However, CLCs have also come to Ottawa to meet with CNSC staff. Second, CNSC staff has been invited into the community to present at community liaison meetings. This is an initial meet and greet with CLC members, and CNSC staff make the offer to come back into the community if they wish to conduct further outreach activities. We also emphasize that there's no rush to meet with us. It's at the discretion of the CLC on whether they think the community is interested in learning more about our regulatory role at the appropriate time. For example, on 2 occasions, CNSC has been invited back by CLCs to give a similar presentation as there were new members or the CLCs thought that there was interest from the public in the community to hear about the regulator. Furthermore, at the request of CLCs, CNSC staff have held open houses in those communities. CNSC staff have also met with Aboriginal groups. The CNSC can repeat the above-mentioned activities as there may be new people on the CLC or more interest from the community to hear from the regulator. In addition, there may be interest from regional groups or Aboriginal groups. Therefore, additional CNSC outreach activities are planned as the APM process unfolds. CNSC staff have conducted over 35 outreach activities since May 2010. This map displays 2 things: the status of each of the community in the APM process. Again, as a reminder, the blue circles are the communities who are still in the NWMO's Learn More process. In 2, it outlines CNSC's outreach activities, and these are shown in the purple-colored squares. So the lightest purple-colored square depicts the first step, where it's typically the mayor and council travel to Ottawa, so before CLCs are formed, for a day-long presentation with CNSC staff. CNSC staff have conducted 18 sessions, and again, some of them have occurred twice. For example, in Ignace, we had one in May 2010 and another in November 2011 due to council member changes. The medium purple square, as follow-up to the initial meeting or at the request of CLC, CNSC staff have been invited into the communities to give a presentation to the community CLCs. Members of the public are often present at these meetings. CNSC has conducted 14 of these activities. And the dark purple squares show where the CNSC has been requested to conduct open houses. To date, 5 open houses have been carried out in the communities of Ignace, Ear Falls, Hornpain, Huron-Kinloss, Elliot Lake, and Spanish, and all of those are located in Ontario. CNSC anticipates future open houses in the spring of 2015, starting with Blind River, Ontario. In addition, there have been recent requests from Aboriginal groups to meet with CNSC staff. These are not shown on the map. And CNSC anticipates requests from Aboriginal groups and regional communities in the next year. In addition, CNSC have combined outreach activities with existing facilities, as sometimes there is overlap. For example, CNSC staff have met with Mississauga First Nations to talk about how we regulate the Blind River facility. However, the next meeting will focus on CNSC's early role in the APM initiative. These are CNSC's key messages when conducting outreach. Again, CNSC is the independent regulator, no license application, and it is early in the process. We are clear that we do not promote the EPM program or nuclear energy. We do not create energy policy. CNSC role is to ensure safety. Messages emphasize who the CNSC is and our regulatory role, and this was one of the key messages that was stressed as important to communicate to the public when we spoke to regulators in Sweden and Finland in June 2013. Ensure that the roles are clear between the regulator, the implementer, or the future license applicant. And now I'm going to focus on CNSC open houses. The open houses are held at the request of the CLC, typically as a follow-up to the day-long meeting in Ottawa or a CLC meeting. First, CNSC starts by developing a logistics plan. Second, we have at least one teleconference with the CLC chair and their project administrator or project coordinator. The CLCs have been an excellent resource for CNSC staff. For example, they provide information on where to hold the open house, where to put public notices. They actually help with posting of public notices in the community. They help us on who to invite and help with shipping and logistics. Based on the feedback from the CLCs, CNSC typically hold one open house session in the afternoon and one in the evening. We have also held an open house on the weekend last summer at the request of the CLC so that cottagers could attend this open house. The third step is public notices. We also obtain help from the CLC on how best to notify the public. For example, what radio station they suggest using, newspaper, even local advertisement bags, and advising on the mail drop. At the open houses, staff have received good feedback from attendees on the public notices. So far, I think the mail drop has been the most successful. And even if people do not attend the open house, they've received our invitation through the mail. The photos on the right-hand side are examples of CNSC public notices. The first photo is an example of a mail drop invitation, and in the foreground is an example of a CLC, including the notice in their newsletter of CNSC's upcoming open house. In addition, CNSC also sends invitations to the mayor and the mayors of surrounding communities, and also Aboriginal groups in the area. Again, the CLCs, we work with them to help indicate which surrounding communities they have been communicating with, and if they've been communicating with any Aboriginal groups as well. So the following slides illustrate some of the outreach tools that CNSC staff use at open houses. So first, CNSC staff have created 8 panels of who the CNSC is, our early role in this initiative, how we regulate, how we inspect to ensure nuclear facilities are safe. We have a panel on Aboriginal consultation, transportation of used fuel, and international collaboration. And the photo at the top corner is an example. One of the information panels actually explains the Commission. Members of the public often ask questions about the Commission and its independency. And to help the CLCs learn more about the Commission, CNSC staff have notified the CLCs of this meeting presentation this afternoon so they can get further information about the Commission. The second tool is the one-on-one discussions that members of the public have with CNSC staff, and we found this to be the best outreach tool. For example, members of the public get to talk to an actual inspector, specialist in geology, environment, and international relations. This one-on-one format allows people to ask questions and also to voice their concerns. Staff can provide factual information, or if we don't know the answer, or if the question is beyond our mandate, we can help them to find the information. There's also notification of CNSC open houses on CNSC Facebook account. We've also found it useful to have web accessibility so that we can show people our website or where to find information on our website. We've also helped people subscribe to CNSC's email notification. We've also used the CNSC online, but we found that members of the public were hesitant to touch the screen. So we typically have a staff member sit down with them and help them go through the online program. And finally, at the bottom, we have CNSC handouts. We put a bunch of information on USB sticks. We also have our annual reports, fact sheets, on FAQs on transportation, fact sheets on regulating repositories. So a lot of information if they want to know more about us. So the following slides are examples of CNSC open houses. These slides include a photo from CNSC's 2 open houses in Ear Falls, Ontario, which was held in April 2013. An open house was held in the afternoon, and as part of the evening open house, the Ear Falls CLC specifically requested a presentation from CNSC staff. So a 10 to 15 minute presentation at the start of the open house in the evening, and then the rest of the open house followed. This is an example of CNSC holding 2 open houses, again in April 2013 in Ignace, Ontario. And this is a photo of CNSC staff having one-on-one discussions with members of the public. And we also offer to walk members of the public through the 8 panels that we have, or they can also explore the panels on their own. However, typically members like CNSC staff to walk them through the panels, just explain them a bit further, and they may have follow-up questions as we go through. This photo is from CNSC Open House in Elliot Lake on October 18th, 2014. Again, CNSC held 2 open houses, one in the afternoon and one in the evening. And this is just a photo of the outreach team. This was a larger community, so more staff were brought in to help with the open house and to help answer questions. Also, the Elliot Lake CLC specifically requested kind of a hands-on demonstration of what radiation is and how to detect it. So we brought a radiation protection specialist with us to provide the demonstration to members of the public. And this photo is from 2 open houses in Spanish, Ontario in November. And again, this is a photo of members of the public exploring the panels at their local marina where we held the open house. And our CNSC geologists discussing geology maps of the region. And at the last open house that we held in Elliot Lake, so before this open house, the public was very interested in the maps of the area and the geology, so we decided to bring them with us to the next open house to show them. So the following is just a snapshot of topics of questions. Members of the public at each of the open houses have asked us excellent questions, and staff have had many in-depth discussions. And please note, this is not an exhaustive list, but in general, just explaining the CNSC, who we are, how we ensure safety, our licensing process, so our life cycle from siting to closure to operation, decommissioning, abandonment, the frequency of inspections. They were also curious about that we can actually do unannounced inspections. That was of curiosity to them, and the independency of the commission. And general questions on repository safety. So what if something goes wrong? Could it affect my drinking water? What if there was an accident? Well, if there was an earthquake? Basically, how will safety be ensured? We've received questions on CNSC independent research and what's going on internationally, and Dr. Brown will talk about that on upcoming slides. Transportation comes up too, transportation of used nuclear fuel, sometimes emergency preparedness and the packaging of the used nuclear fuel. Clarity on roles, basically clarifying that we are not the NWMO and we cannot answer questions on the site selection process. We are not here to promote, and we do not choose the site. We're here basically to ensure safety. So the following are examples of what we've learned from talking to communities and starting since May 2010, so we have almost 5 years of experience. Overall feedback has been very positive. People are happy to hear that someone is looking after safety and that we are here for a long time. So they may not realize that we're here for the life cycle of the nuclear facility, and if a license is issued, that there are safety checks and rules that need to be followed. It's been good to explain who we are and our early involvement. Some members of the public didn't know that there was an independent nuclear regulator, so this is new information for some of them. Again, I've mentioned this, the importance of clarifying roles. You know, who's the regulator, who's the implementer, the future license applicant. Explaining our independence from the APM initiative. This also reinforces the importance of conducting our outreach activities separately from the NWMO, and this was also emphasized by the Swedish regulator as something to do. To be clear, we're not here to promote the project, but to ensure safety if an application were to be received in the future. Again, to understand general concerns of the public and to establish a relationship with people in these communities. The communities like that they could meet subject matter experts, for example, inspectors, on how they conduct compliance enforcement measures, and that we can have one-on-one discussions. And taking in what we've learned so far, again, the importance of establishing a single point of contact so people know who to contact and have a face to put with it. This was also feedback we received from the Swedish regulator, SSM. Seek feedback from the community liaison committees, or the CLCs. This is kind of a new resource for us in the communities, so it's been a good resource to get information from and to get feedback from. And again, we've established a communication assessment plan, and this is a living document. And we are trying to be proactive and update as the project moves forward. And we will revisit ideas for future outreach with communities and CLCs this winter, and also get feedback from them on what they want to hear from us as well. So to assist the public, CNSC have included information on talking to communities on our external website. The site will be updated as the APM initiative proceeds. CNSC are currently developing new content. The updated text will inform those interested about CNSC role and our licensing process for a deep geological repository if we receive an application in the future. Now I will turn the presentation over to Dr. Brown.
Thank you, Ms. Mackey. CNSC staff participate in several international projects, and right now, several other countries, particularly in the European Union, are ahead of us in terms of repositories. So in terms of repository projects, we can learn from their experience, and in turn, they are interested to learn about the CNSC and how we regulate, how we carry out research, and how we carry out our technical reviews. Where possible, CNSC staff collaborate on research projects, and a key point is that not every country researches everything. So these collaborations are one way to share knowledge and to pool resources on a global scale. This slide highlights the diversity of CNSC's international collaborations. CNSC is actively involved in several groups in the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, which in general have a regulatory focus. The Waste Safety Standards Committee looks at what guidance documents are needed for radioactive waste and deep geological repository projects. The International Project on Demonstrating the Safety of Geological Disposal, GEOSAF, aims to harmonize approaches for the development of the safety case. HYDRA looks at human intrusion in the context of radioactive waste disposal. The focus is on clarifying IAEA requirements and guidance relevant to the assessment of future human actions and human intrusion. The Underground Research Facilities Network is very important for us in Canada, as there is currently no underground research laboratory or URL in Canada. So that program provides an overview of experimental programs at URLs that are in that network. CNSC is also involved in 2 Nuclear Energy Agency committees, which include industry participants. Thanks. CNSC staff have met with regulators from other countries to talk about pre-licensing activities that they undertook and lessons they learned, and also to visit underground research laboratories and other facilities. Staff also actively participate in the Joint Convention on the Safety of Spent Fuel Management and on the Safety of Radioactive Waste Management. This slide provides examples of international projects that CNSC staff are involved in. I will speak first to what's called the CELEX project. So the CNSC collaborates with the IRSN, which is the French Institut de Radioprotection et de Sûreté Nucléaire, through a MOU to exchange information and to collaborate on technical, scientific, and regulatory matters. And as part of this collaboration, the CNSC participates in this CELEX project that is performed by the IRSN at their underground research laboratory in Tournemire. The CELEX project is an experimental program that investigates the long-term performance of bentonite seals. The top right photo shows the experimental setup, where bentonite is placed into boreholes that have been drilled into the host rock. The hydraulic and mechanical evolution of the bentonite will be monitored for a period of approximately 10 years. The CNSC contributes financially to the project for its experimental work, but also mathematically models the experimental data that is gathered from the CLX experiment. So the project of the CLX modeling work is that is done by the CNSC is periodically presented in a forum called DCOVALX. So DCOVALX is an internationally collaborative project to develop models to interpret data from experimental data from underground research laboratories from around the world, and also from laboratory experiments. Within DCOVALX, CNSC also models a heating experiment that is called HEE that's being carried out at Monterrey, which is Switzerland's underground research laboratory. It was set up to investigate the effect of heat generation from used nuclear fuel on the host rock and engineered barriers. The setup of the heating experiment is shown in the lower photo on the right-hand side. It consists of 2 heaters inserted into bentonite blocks that are then placed into a tunnel that was excavated into the host rock. The response of both the bentonite and the surrounding host rock to heating up to a temperature of 140 degrees is monitored. So this slide is about SciTex. SciTex is the sustainable network for independent technical expertise of radioactive waste disposal. It was a European Commission project proposed and coordinated by the IRSN. It began on January 1st of 2012, and it ran for 2 years. It consisted of 10 European Commission countries and Canada represented through the CNSC. And it was a collaboration to address safety issues around the long-term management of used nuclear fuel, looking at what regulatory expectations should be, what are the main technical issues for safety, and how a technical review of a safety case should proceed. A follow-up project has been proposed, and if accepted, would begin in May of 2015, and Canada's involvement would continue through the CNSC. Contacts made through CNSC's international network made it possible for a small group of CNSC staff to meet with regulators from Finland and Sweden and to visit underground research laboratories and near-surface disposal facilities in those countries in June of 2013. These types of activities are excellent for training, and we've also found that for outreach, it's been extremely useful to tell members of the public that we work with other regulators around the world and visit facilities that are further along in the process from us of establishing a deep geological repository. The next several slides will show photos of the facilities that we visited in Sweden and in Finland. So this photo is of a CNSC staff member walking down the ramp at Sweden's underground research lab called ASPA, which is used only for research purposes. It's located in a different area than the proposed location of the final repository for Sweden's used nuclear fuel. In their outreach material, the ASPA URL is referred to as a dress rehearsal. So it's where field tests are carried out and technical solutions to potential problems are investigating at the proposed host rock depth of around 500 meters. So this is a photo from Sweden of a shallow repository that was excavated in bedrock to a depth of around 50 meters. In Sweden and Finland, shallow repositories are used for short-lived, low and intermediate level radioactive waste from reactors, from nuclear power plants. This photo shows the rock fault that's used for low-level waste, which in this case has been encased in concrete. So a small correction for this slide that it isn't staff photos, but it is from Sweden's waste management organization, SKB. This is a photo from one of the 2 near-surface repositories for low-level and short-lived intermediate-level reactor wastes in Finland. So this site was excavated to a depth of around 60 meters, and the photo shows one of the silos. Oh, this is a photo of on Callo, which is Finland's underground research laboratory for used nuclear fuel. In contrast to Sweden, it is also the site of the final repository, but it's currently only used for research and characterization purposes. The photo shows CNSC staff and representatives from nuclear power plant facilities, the waste producers, and from Finland's waste management organization called Posiva. The group is standing in a demonstration tunnel at a depth of around 420 meters, which I will point out in the schematic of Callo on the next slide. So this illustration shows the design of the Callo facility, which is Finland's underground research laboratory, where we participated on an inspection with the regulator. So far, it's used only for research and rock characterization and stores no used nuclear fuel. You can see that the access tunnel is extended to the left, and this was done to avoid a fracture zone, which they didn't observe from the surface. So the illustration shows the more than 4 kilometers of ramp that has been excavated to a depth of around 500 meters, and the characterization and demonstration tunnels are at a depth of around 420 meters. And the next slide shows some photos from that level. So these photos from Callo were taken while on a site visit with the regulator in Finland. The left photo shows the group walking down the ramp and was taken at around 4,200 meters along the ramp at the demonstration level. So the fluorescent markings on the left that arc upward show the location of a planned demonstration tunnel that hasn't yet been excavated. And on the right, you can see the group is standing in a demonstration tunnel that has been excavated. Now, both of these photos show cylindrical pilot disposal cells that were excavated vertically downward into the host rock for characterization purposes. So the right photo shows a fracture going through one of the cells. It is actually a water conducting fracture, and so that cell would not be used for disposal. In summary, for the most part, this visit reinforced that CNSC's work in the pre-licensing stage is on par with what is being done internationally. We were able to discuss activities that they carried out at the pre-licensing stage and what they wish they had done sooner. It reinforced for us the importance of our own pre-licensing activities, such as outreach and the establishment of an independent advisory group. Furthermore, both regulators emphasized the importance of having clear guidance and an ongoing review process in the pre-licensing phase. It was advised that informal meetings between CNSC and NWMO specialists should occur more frequently, and that CNSC should consider carrying out informal inspections. One of the things that CNSC staff are now planning for 2015 is a management system assessment of the NWMO's contractor procurement process. In return, CNSC provided our hosts in Sweden and Finland with information on Canada's regulatory process and safety-focused repository research program. I will now hand the presentation back to Ms. Mecki.
So in summary, CNSC's participation in pre-licensing phase over the next several years will involve CNSC staff continuing to make presentations during this period on CNSC's roles and the requirements for long-term management of used nuclear fuel to various communities and Aboriginal groups participating in the NWMO's siting processes. It may also include different provinces. Informing the NWMO of our regulatory requirements during conceptual reviews and during review of any future site evaluations that may be completed for interested communities. CNSC to conduct informal audit of NWMO's quality or management system of contractor procurement, as this is something tangible that we can actually review. It's not conceptual, like there's real information there. In the future, observe NWMO's outreach activity, basically how information is being communicated to the public, as This we see as a large section of a possible future license application will be the Public Information Program. CNSC staff have been conducting independent research since 1978, starting the focus on crystalline. CNSC staff, again, will continue to have international collaboration, and if the Commission is interested in learning more about CNSC's independent research program for deep geological repositories, CNSC staff are able to return to give a briefing. The contribution agreement has been signed, and the kickoff meeting will be in March 2015. CNSC staff are also working on the regulatory framework, which will involve deep geological repositories for used nuclear fuel. For example, on the development of discussion paper that may lead to the development of radioactive waste and decommissioning regulations. And again, also looking at our existing and possible future regulatory guides. Our community outreach is expected to expand to regional, Aboriginal, and even possible transportation hubs as this initiative progresses. I'll now turn it back to Dr. Newland.
Thank you. That concludes staff's presentation. We're available for any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you.